The stars were burning. Across 300 light-years of space, the Vrexan swarm moved like a plague of locusts through a wheat field. They left nothing behind. No survivors. No buildings. No hope, just dead rocks floating in the void where living worlds had once spun. Ambassador Torvex stood before the Galactic Coalition Council and tried to keep his voice steady. His pale blue skin had turned almost gray from stress, and his 4 eyes blinked rapidly as he delivered the news that no one wanted to hear. The combined fleets of 12 member species had failed. The Battle of Meridian Prime had cost them 40,000 ships and 18 million lives. The swarm had lost nothing that mattered. For every drone they killed, 10 more took its place. The council chamber fell silent. Representatives from 100 worlds sat frozen in their seats. The Ilari, the Korthon, the Mavani, and dozens of other species had fought the swarm for nearly a century. They had thrown everything they had at the enemy: advanced plasma weapons, antimatter bombs, biological agents. Nothing worked. The swarm simply adapted and kept coming. "We have one option remaining," Torvex said. His voice echoed in the vast chamber. "We must ask the humans for help." Laughter broke out from several sections. The Korthon ambassador, a massive creature covered in thick scales, slammed his fist on his desk. "The humans? Those primitives only joined the coalition 30 years ago. They still use chemical projectile weapons. Their ships are slow. Their technology is centuries behind ours." Torvex waited for the noise to die down. "I am aware of their limitations, but we have no other choice. Every species in this chamber has committed its full military strength. We have nothing left to give. The humans have not yet sent any forces." The request went out that same day. A faster-than-light transmission reached Earth in 17 hours. It arrived at Fleet Command Headquarters in Geneva, where Admiral Lisa Garrett was reviewing patrol reports from the outer colonies. Lisa was 52 years old with short gray hair and eyes that had seen too much death. She had commanded ships during the Mars Rebellion and the Jupiter Station incident. She had buried friends and sent young men and women to die for causes they barely understood. When she read the Coalition's message, she felt something she had not felt in years: fear. She called an emergency meeting within the hour. General Nathan Cole arrived first. He was a tall man with dark skin and a permanent frown. He had spent 30 years in the ground forces and had the scars to prove it. Dr. Amy Pearson came next. She was younger than the others, barely 40, with red hair pulled back in a tight ponytail. She ran a program that most people in the government did not even know existed. "They want soldiers," Lisa said. She pushed the datapad across the table. "As many as we can send. They're losing the war." Nathan read the message and shook his head. "Our Marines are good, but they're not equipped for this kind of fight. We've seen the footage from Meridian Prime. Those swarm drones tear through armored vehicles like paper. Our boys would be slaughtered." "We could send support ships," Lisa suggested. "Medical vessels. Supply transports. It's not much, but it's something." Amy had been silent until now. She looked at the other two with an expression that Lisa could not quite read. "There's another option," she said quietly. "Project Erebus." Nathan's frown deepened. "That program was supposed to be theoretical. You told me you were still years away from deployment." "I lied." Amy pulled out her own datapad and placed it on the table. "We've been ready for 6 months. I was waiting for the right situation. I think this is it." Lisa looked at the files Amy had opened. Her stomach turned. "You can't be serious." "I'm completely serious. The Coalition asked for soldiers. They didn't specify that those soldiers had to be human." Amy leaned forward. "Earth spent 4 billion years creating the most efficient killing machines in the known universe. Every predator on our planet evolved in an environment of constant competition and death. They're faster, stronger, and more ruthless than anything the galaxy has ever seen." "They're animals," Nathan said. "They can't follow orders. They can't coordinate attacks. They're not weapons. They're zoo exhibits." Amy smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. That's where you're wrong. Project Erebus has spent the last 15 years developing neural implant technology. Our subjects can receive basic commands. Attack. Retreat. Hold position. They don't need complex orders. They just need to be pointed at the enemy and released. Lisa stood up and walked to the window. Below her, the city of Geneva stretched out toward the mountains. People walked through the streets, living their normal lives, completely unaware of the decision being made in this room. The coalition will think we've gone insane, she said. Maybe we have, Amy replied. But insanity might be exactly what this war needs. The swarm has fought 100 species. They've adapted to every weapon, every tactic, every strategy. But they've never faced anything like Earth's predators. They've never fought something that kills by instinct instead of logic. The vote was taken. It was unanimous. Lisa signed the deployment orders herself, her hand trembling slightly as she wrote her name. 3 days later, the first transport ships launched from a classified facility in northern Canada. They carried no human soldiers, no Marines, no pilots. Instead, their cargo holds were filled with massive containment units. Each unit was reinforced with triple-layer titanium walls and equipped with sedation systems. Warning labels covered every surface, written in 17 languages. Do not open until deployment. As the ships disappeared into faster-than-light travel, Lisa stood on the observation deck and watched them go. She thought about what she had just done. For 30 years, humanity had tried to prove to the galaxy that they were civilized, that they were peaceful, that they had evolved beyond their violent past. Now, she was about to show the universe exactly what kind of planet Earth really was. The galaxy had asked for soldiers. Humanity was sending something much worse. They were sending the creatures that had haunted human nightmares since the beginning of time, the monsters that had stalked their ancestors through dark forests and deep waters, the predators that had shaped human evolution through millions of years of terror. The swarm had conquered 100 worlds. They had never known fear. That was about to change. Coalition Station Arcturus was the largest military installation in the galaxy. It orbited a dead star at the edge of controlled space, and its docking bays could hold 10,000 ships at once. Ambassador Torvex had seen fleets from a dozen species pass through those bays. He had watched warriors of every shape and size march across those metal floors. Nothing had prepared him for what he saw when the human transports arrived. He had expected soldiers, men and women in combat armor, carrying their primitive rifles and wearing their strange fabric uniforms. He had prepared a welcome speech. He had arranged for translators and housing and supply chains. He had done everything right. Then the cargo bay doors opened. The first thing Torvex noticed was the smell. It was wild and raw and ancient. It triggered something deep in his brain. Some primitive warning system that his species had not used in 10,000 years. His hearts began to beat faster. His 4 eyes widened. Every instinct told him to run. Humans in strange suits emerged first. They wore thick protective gear that covered every part of their bodies. They carried devices that made high-pitched sounds. They moved carefully, like people walking through a field of hidden traps. Captain Derek Santos approached Torvex with a datapad in his hand. He was a young man with brown skin and dark eyes. He smiled, but there was something hard behind that smile. Something dangerous. "Ambassador," Derek said. "Thank you for receiving us. I have the deployment protocols here. I think we should discuss them somewhere private." Torvex looked past Derek at the massive containment units being rolled off the transport ships. They were huge, easily 3 times the size of a Korthon battle tank. Strange sounds came from inside them. Growls. Hisses. Something that sounded almost like breathing. "Captain Santos," Torvex said slowly. "What exactly have you brought to my station?" Derek's smile grew wider. "Earth's oldest warriors. Ambassador. Creatures that have been perfecting the art of killing for longer than your species has existed." The first demonstration took place in a reinforced observation chamber. Torvex stood behind 3 layers of transparent steel, while human handlers prepared the enclosure. They brought in a piece of meat the size of a small vehicle and placed it in the center of the room. Then they opened the first container. Torvex had studied human culture. He knew they shared their planet with other species. He had seen pictures of their pets and found them rather cute. Small furry things that seemed harmless. The creature that emerged from the container was not harmless. It was nearly 6 meters long. Its body was covered in thick, armored scales that looked harder than combat plating. Its jaws were massive, filled with teeth designed to crush bone. It moved with a slow, patient grace that somehow made it more terrifying, not less. Its eyes were cold and empty. There was no emotion there. No mercy. Just hunger. "We call it a saltwater crocodile," Derek said calmly. "This species has existed on Earth for over 200 million years. It has survived asteroid impacts, ice ages, and the rise and fall of countless other predators. It is, quite simply, the perfect killing machine." The crocodile reached the meat. Its jaws closed with a sound like thunder. Bones shattered, flesh tore. The entire piece of meat disappeared in seconds. Torvex could not speak. His translator device tried to find words, but his mind had gone blank. "This is one of our gentler specimens," Derek continued. "We have enhanced them with neural implants that allow basic command response. They can't think, but they can follow simple directions. Attack. Stop. Return. That's all they need." Over the next several hours, Torvex watched as container after container was opened. Each one held something more terrifying than the last. The wolves came next. On Earth, they were considered medium-sized predators. The humans had changed that. Through genetic enhancement, they had grown them to the size of ground vehicles. They moved in packs, communicating through sounds that Torvex could barely hear. Their eyes tracked everything. Their muscles tensed at the slightest movement. When a human handler dropped a metal tool by accident, 3 wolves turned toward the sound in perfect unison, ready to attack. Then came the bears. Torvex had no framework for understanding what he was seeing. These creatures were massive, nearly 4 meters tall when they stood on their back legs. Their claws had been reinforced with titanium. Their fur was thick enough to stop standard plasma rounds. One of them, a creature the humans called Unit 7, looked directly at Torvex through the observation glass. There was intelligence in those eyes. Cold, patient intelligence. "We call him Goliath," said a human handler. Her name was Katie Morgan, and she spoke about the bear the way other soldiers spoke about their weapons. "He's killed 17 enemy combatants in training simulations. He's never been injured. He doesn't know how to stop. He doesn't want to stop." Admiral Lisa Garrett arrived at the station that evening. She had come to oversee the deployment personally. Torvex met her in his private quarters, still shaking from what he had witnessed. "Why?" he asked. It was the only word he could manage. Lisa understood the question. "Because we grew up with them," she said simply. "Humans didn't become the dominant species on Earth by being the strongest or the fastest. We became dominant by learning to fear, by learning to respect the things that could kill us, by learning to survive." She walked to the window and looked out at the stars. Every human child grows up hearing stories about monsters. Wolves in the forest, bears in the mountains, crocodiles in the water, sharks in the ocean. We tell those stories because they're true, because those monsters are real, and because we never forgot what it felt like to be prey. Torvex sat down heavily. His legs could no longer support him. "The Coalition asked for soldiers," he said quietly. "We expected warriors, people we could understand." Lisa turned to face him. Her eyes were hard. "The swarm has conquered 100 worlds, because those worlds sent soldiers. Soldiers fight with honor. Soldiers follow rules. Soldiers can be predicted." She paused. "Predators don't follow rules, Ambassador. Predators have only one purpose: to kill, to feed, to survive. The swarm has never faced anything like what we're about to send against them." That night, Torvex lay awake in his quarters. He could hear sounds echoing through the station. Growls and howls and things he could not identify. The human handlers worked through the night, preparing their creatures for deployment. Tomorrow, they would send monsters to fight monsters. Torvex was not sure which ones frightened him more. Korath 7th was a mining world. 3 million people had lived there, digging precious metals from the red soil and sending them to factories across the galaxy. Now, it was a battlefield. The Vrexan swarm had arrived 3 days ago, and half the planet was already lost. Coalition forces held a defensive line along a mountain range in the northern hemisphere. Behind them, transport ships were evacuating as many civilians as they could carry. In front of them, an endless tide of swarm drones marched forward. They came in waves that never stopped. Kill one, and 10 more took its place. The Coalition soldiers were tired. They were running out of ammunition. They knew they were going to die. Dr. Amy Pearson watched the battle from orbit. She sat in the command center of the carrier ship Horizon. Surrounded by screens showing real-time data from the surface, General Nathan Cole stood beside her, his jaw tight with tension. "The defensive line will collapse within 6 hours," said a tactical officer. "Maybe sooner. The drones are pushing harder than expected." Nathan turned to Amy. "Is it time?" Amy looked at her datapad. The first wave of transport pods was ready. Inside each pod, sedated predators waited for release. Neural implants hummed quietly, ready to receive commands. Feeding schedules had been adjusted. The creatures were hungry. They were angry. They were ready. "Deploy the wolves first," Amy said. "Drop them on the eastern flank where the drone concentration is highest." The pods screamed through the atmosphere like falling stars. Coalition soldiers on the ground looked up in confusion. No one had told them. Reinforcements were coming. When the pods slammed into the earth and burst open, the confusion turned to terror. Sergeant Marcus Webb had been fighting the swarm for 2 years. He had seen things that gave him nightmares. He thought nothing could surprise him anymore. Then he watched a creature the size of a small transport vehicle explode out of a drop pod and slam into a Vrexan drone with enough force to shatter its armored shell. The wolf did not stop to eat. It did not pause to celebrate its kill. It simply turned and attacked the next drone. And the next. And the next. Its packmates spread out around it, working together in perfect coordination. They circled the drones, cut them off from support, and tore them apart piece by piece. The swarm drones were not built for this kind of fight. They were designed to overwhelm through numbers. They marched in formations. They attacked in patterns. They expected their enemies to stand in lines and shoot at them. The wolves did not stand in lines. They ran. They circled. They appeared from nowhere and vanished into shadows. They hit weak points that the drones did not even know they had. Joints. Sensor clusters. The soft tissue between armored plates. Every attack was precise. Every kill was efficient. Handler Katie Morgan watched through her tactical display as her wolf pack tore through a drone formation. She whispered commands through her neural link. "Flank left. Hold position. Pursue." The wolves responded instantly, adjusting their attacks based on her guidance. "We're getting resistance on the western approach," Nathan said. "The drones are adapting. They're forming defensive clusters." Amy nodded. "Send in the bears." Goliath hit the ground running. The drop pod had barely opened before he was moving, driven by hunger and rage and something that might have been joy. He was built for this. His entire species had spent millions of years evolving into the perfect ambush predator. Now, enhanced by human technology and guided by human handlers, he was something more, something terrible. A Vrexan drone commander, a larger specimen that coordinated local units, saw Goliath approaching. It raised its plasma caster and fired 3 shots directly into the bear's chest. Goliath did not slow down. His biomesh armor absorbed the plasma blasts. His healing implants began repairing the damage immediately. He closed the distance in seconds, rising onto his back legs as he reached the drone commander. His titanium-reinforced claws swung down with enough force to split the creature in half. Coalition soldiers watched from their fortifications. Many of them had never seen Earth creatures before. They stared in silence as the massive bear rampaged through the drone formation. killing everything in its path. Some soldiers cheered, others prayed. A few simply sat down and wondered what kind of planet could produce such monsters. The swarm hive mind processed the new data with growing confusion. In 10,000 years of conquest, it had developed responses to every weapon and tactic in the galaxy. Energy weapons, kinetic weapons, chemical weapons, biological weapons. It had solutions for everything. It had no solution for this. These new enemies did not fight like soldiers. They did not advance in formation. They did not hold positions. They did not seem to care about their own survival. They simply attacked and killed and ate. The hive mind tried to analyze their patterns, but there were no patterns. Only chaos, only violence, only death. Something else troubled the hive mind, something it had never experienced before. When its drones faced the wolves and bears, their combat efficiency dropped by 30%. Their response times slowed. Their coordination suffered. The hive mind ran diagnostic after diagnostic, trying to understand the malfunction. It took hours to identify the problem. The drones were afraid. For the first time in their existence, Vrexan drones were feeling fear. The hive mind did not know what to do with this information. Fear was supposed to be a weapon they used against others. They had never been on the receiving end. By nightfall, the coalition defensive line had stabilized. The swarm advance had stopped. Thousands of drone corpses littered the battlefield, torn apart by claws and fangs and crushing jaws. Among them, a few wolf and bear bodies lay still. They had died fighting. They had died killing. Katie Morgan stood at the edge of the fortification, looking out at the carnage. Her wolf pack was resting nearby, their handlers feeding them and treating their wounds. They would be ready to fight again by morning. A coalition officer approached her. His scales were pale, and his hands were shaking. "What are you people?" he asked quietly. Katie did not answer immediately. She watched Goliath eating a drone corpse in the distance, his massive jaws crushing armored chitin like it was nothing. "We're survivors," she said finally. "We come from a world where everything tries to kill everything else, where the strong eat the weak, and the weak die screaming, where you either become a predator or you become food." She turned to face the alien officer. "The swarm thinks they're the ultimate hunters. They've never met the creatures that taught humans how to fear." Somewhere in the distance, a wolf howled. Others joined it, their voices rising into the alien sky. On a dozen worlds, coalition forces heard reports of the impossible victory at Korath 7th. On 100 worlds, the swarm hive mind began to plan its response. The war was just beginning. The swarm learned. It always learned. That was what made it so dangerous. Every battle provided new data. Every defeat became a lesson. The hive mind analyzed the Earth predators for 17 days, studying every recorded fight, every movement pattern, every weakness. Then it created something new. The second battle took place at Vex's station, a coalition supply depot that the swarm wanted badly. Human forces deployed their standard predator units, expecting another easy victory. What they found instead was a nightmare. The new swarm drones were different. They were faster. Their armor was thicker. Their weapons hit harder. But the worst change was in their behavior. They no longer fought in predictable formations. They no longer stood and died. They ran, they hid, they ambushed. The swarm had learned to hunt. Corporal Ryan Bennett watched his wolf pack die one by one. He had trained with them for 4 years. He knew their names, their personalities, their favorite foods. Luna was the pack leader, brave and clever. Shadow was the quiet one who always watched the flanks. Storm was young and reckless, always first into danger. Storm died first. A new type of drone emerged from underground and impaled him before he could react. Luna tried to save him and took a plasma bolt through the skull. Shadow lasted longest, fighting 3 drones at once until his body simply gave out from too many wounds. Ryan screamed commands through his neural link, but there was nothing left to command. His pack was gone. 4 years of partnership, destroyed in less than 10 minutes. Across the battlefield, similar scenes played out. The enhanced wolves were fast, but the new drones were faster. The bears were strong, but the new drones attacked in swarms that even Goliath could not survive. Unit 7. The legendary Kodiak that had never been defeated finally fell beneath a tide of blade limbs and plasma fire. He killed 19 drones before he died. His handlers recovered his body and wept. The retreat from Vex's station was the lowest point of the war. 30% of all deployed animals were killed. Morale among the handler corps collapsed. These were not machines that could be rebuilt. These were living creatures that had trusted their human partners. Watching them die hurt in ways that regular military losses did not. Dr. Amy Pearson locked herself in her laboratory for 3 days. She reviewed every piece of data from the battle. She studied the new drone variants. She searched for weaknesses, for patterns, for anything that could give humanity an edge. On the 4th day, she called a meeting with Admiral Lisa Garrett and General Nathan Cole. "We made a mistake," Amy said. Her voice was flat, exhausted. "We sent predators, but we sent the wrong kind. Wolves and bears evolved to hunt prey. The swarm adapted because it learned to stop being prey." Nathan frowned. "What alternative do we have?" Amy brought up a new set of files on the main display. "We need apex predators. Creatures that evolved specifically to kill other predators. The things that hunted the hunters." The second phase of Project Erebus began deployment within a week. The new creatures were different from the first wave. Less obvious, more patient, far more terrifying. The Komodo dragons came first. They were not as dramatic as the bears or as fast as the wolves. They did not roar or charge. They simply waited. They tracked their prey for miles, following blood trails and scent markers. When they attacked, they did not try to kill quickly. Their venom prevented blood from clotting. Their bite delivered deadly bacteria. A single wound could kill over days of slow agony. The swarm drones learned to fear the dragons because they could not predict them. A dragon might attack immediately, or it might follow for hours, or days. The uncertainty damaged hive mind coordination. Drones began wasting resources watching for threats that might never come. The big cats arrived next. Lions worked in teams, flanking and encircling their targets. Tigers attacked from ambush with overwhelming power. Leopards infiltrated enemy positions, climbing structures that drones assumed were safe, striking from above without warning. Each species brought different tactics, different strategies, different kinds of death. But the true horror was saved for last. Captain Derek Santos personally oversaw the deployment of the Spider program. Even other human handlers found it disturbing. Thousands of huntsman spiders, each one the size of a dinner plate, enhanced with paralytic venom and swarm coordination implants. They were deployed through ventilation systems into a Vrexan hive structure on a colony world called Ferrix Prime. The screams started within hours. Not from the spiders, from the drones. Swarm drones communicated through a form of telepathic link. When one drone experienced something, nearby drones felt echoes of it. The hive mind used this to coordinate attacks and share tactical information. Now it became a curse. The spiders did not kill quickly. They paralyzed their prey and waited. They crawled over the frozen drones, taking small bites, feeding slowly. The paralyzed drones remained conscious through all of it. Their terror and pain broadcast through the telepathic network, disrupting coordination across the entire sector. Coalition observers monitored the psychic frequencies. They heard the swarm hive mind trying to process what was happening. It was not anger. It was not calculation. It was panic. Pure, overwhelming panic. Ambassador Torvex watched the battle reports in his quarters aboard Station Arcturus. His assistant found him sitting in darkness, staring at nothing. "Ambassador," the assistant asked nervously, "are you unwell?" Torvex did not respond immediately. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. "I asked them why," he said. "Why humans keep such monsters on their world. Do you know what Admiral Garrett told me?" The assistant shook his head. She said humans did not keep them. The monsters were there first. Humans just learned to survive alongside them. Torvex turned to face his assistant. His 4 eyes were wide with something that might have been awe or terror, or both. They did not conquer their world. They did not tame it. They simply refused to die. For millions of years, surrounded by creatures that could tear them apart, they refused to die. He stood and walked to his window. Outside, human transport ships were arriving with new cargo. More containers. More nightmares. We thought we were inviting children into our coalition, Torvek said. Primitive newcomers who would be grateful for our protection and guidance. We were wrong. We invited survivors. Survivors of a world that makes the swarm look merciful. He paused. And now they are teaching the universe what survival really means. Somewhere in the depths of space, the swarm hive mind continued to process the impossible data from Ferrix Prime. It had conquered 100 worlds. It had exterminated thousands of species. It had never, in 10,000 years of existence, experienced anything like this. For the first time in its history, the swarm considered retreat. But the humans were not done yet. The worst was still to come. The war lasted 3 more years after Ferrix Prime. The swarm adapted and fought back. It created new drone variants. It developed countermeasures. It threw everything it had at the coalition forces. But something had changed. The hive mind that had terrorized the galaxy for 10,000 years was no longer fighting to conquer. It was fighting to survive. Humanity kept sending more creatures. Hyenas that laughed as they tore drones apart. Honey badgers that attacked targets 10 times their size without hesitation. Orcas that hunted swarm water drones in coastal regions, working together with the same cold intelligence that wolves showed on land. Each new predator brought new nightmares for the hive mind to process. The coalition began to turn the tide. Worlds that had been lost were reclaimed. Swarm hive ships that had once seemed invincible were destroyed. The enemy was retreating toward its homeworld, pulling back forces from across the galaxy to defend the queens that controlled the entire species. Admiral Lisa Garrett stood in the war room of Coalition Command, looking at a holographic map of swarm territory. Where once there had been hundreds of occupied systems, now there were only a handful. The enemy was cornered. The final battle was approaching. General Nathan Cole entered the room with Dr. Amy Pearson behind him. Both of them looked tired. 3 years of constant warfare had aged them in ways that time alone could not explain. The Coalition Council has made its decision, Nathan said. He placed a datapad on the table. They want to end this. Completely. They want us to deploy our final option. Lisa picked up the datapad and read the orders. Her face went pale. They can't be serious. They are, Amy said. The queens must die. As long as they survive, the swarm can rebuild. The council has decided that total extinction is the only acceptable outcome. Lisa turned away. She walked to the window and stared out at the stars. I argued against this. So did Nathan. We told them there had to be another way. There isn't, Amy replied. Her voice was flat. The swarm cannot be negotiated with. It cannot be contained. It cannot be allowed to recover. The council is right. We have to end this. The final fleet gathered above a dying star. 300 coalition warships, carrying the combined military strength of a dozen species, and among them, 6 human transports carrying the weapon that would end the war. Captain Derek Santos led the ground assault team. He had aged since the first deployment at Coalition Station Arcturus. His eyes had seen too much death. His hands had sent too many creatures to die. But he understood why this had to be done. The Vrexan homeworld was a nightmare given form. Massive hive structures covered the surface like mountains of living flesh. Billions of drones moved through tunnels and chambers, feeding and breeding, and waiting for commands from the queens. The queens themselves lived in the deepest chambers, massive creatures the size of buildings, their minds connected to every drone in the swarm. The coalition fleet provided orbital bombardment, while human transports descended through the atmosphere. They landed near the main hive entrance and began unloading their cargo. Handler Katie Morgan was there. She had lost 3 wolf packs over the course of the war. She had buried friends and watched colleagues break down from grief. But she had kept fighting because there was no other choice. The containers opened. The serpents emerged. King cobras and black mambas, enhanced for size and aggression, poured out of the transport ships by the thousands. They had been specifically bred for this mission. Their venom was modified to be extra potent against Vrexan biology. Their neural implants gave them one simple command: find the queens. Kill them. The serpents moved into the hive tunnels with terrible efficiency. Drones tried to stop them, but snakes were different from wolves or bears. They did not stand and fight. They slipped through cracks and gaps that no other predator could reach. They moved in silence. They struck without warning. The first queen died screaming. Her psychic death cry echoed across 3 star systems. Coalition telepaths aboard the fleet, ships collapsed from the feedback, their minds overwhelmed by alien agony. The hive mind convulsed. Millions of drones stopped moving, paralyzed by the loss of coordination. The second queen died minutes later, then the third, then more. One by one, the ancient minds that had driven the swarm for 10,000 years were silenced by creatures that humans had feared since the dawn of history. Admiral Lisa Garrett listened to the reports from the command ship Horizon. Her face showed no emotion. She had given the order that ended a species. She would carry that weight for the rest of her life. The last queen died at sunset on the Vrexan homeworld. Her final telepathic broadcast carried a single emotion that every species in the galaxy could understand: fear. The swarm that had conquered 100 worlds, that had exterminated thousands of species, that had terrorized the galaxy for 10,000 years, went silent. The drones stopped moving. The hive ships drifted powerless in space. The war was over. The celebrations across Coalition space were muted. Worlds that had lost millions of citizens could not find joy in victory. Species that had faced extinction felt relief, but not happiness. And everyone, without exception, looked at the humans differently than before. Dr. Amy Pearson gave the final debrief to the Coalition Council 1 month after the war ended. She stood before representatives of 100 worlds and explained what humanity had done. Earth is a death world, she said simply. Everything there evolved to kill everything else. The water is full of predators. The land is full of predators. Even the air carries creatures that can end your life. Humans did not rise to dominance by being the strongest or fastest. We survived by learning, by adapting, by finding ways to use the monsters around us instead of being destroyed by them. Ambassador Torvex raised his hand. His voice was quiet when he spoke. Dr. Pearson, are there other creatures on Earth that you did not deploy? Amy paused. The question hung in the air like a threat. Yes, she said finally. There are creatures we refuse to weaponize. Things that live in the deep oceans where light never reaches. Things that even we do not fully understand. Things that have survived unchanged for hundreds of millions of years because nothing could kill them. She looked directly at Torvex. The galaxy should pray they never need to see them. The council chamber fell silent. In the years that followed, humanity was treated with a new kind of respect. Coalition species that had once dismissed them as primitives now went out of their way to be polite. Trade agreements became more favorable. Diplomatic requests were answered faster. No one wanted to offend the species that had ended the swarm. Handler Katie Morgan retired from the military and opened a wildlife sanctuary on a distant colony world. She spent her remaining years caring for wolves and bears and all the creatures that had fought beside her. Sometimes, late at night, she heard howling from the forest beyond her compound. It reminded her of friends she had lost. It reminded her of what survival really cost. Captain Derek Santos returned to Earth. He lived quietly in a small house near the mountains. He never spoke about the war. He never talked about the things he had seen. But sometimes his neighbors noticed him sitting on his porch at night, staring up at the stars with an expression they could not read. Admiral Lisa Garrett remained in service until her death at age 87. Her final words were recorded by a medical assistant. She said she hoped the galaxy would never need Earth's help again. She said she hoped the monsters could rest. And across the universe, in every species that had witnessed what humanity could do, a new legend was born. They told stories about the death world called Earth, about the creatures that lived there, about the people who had survived alongside them and learned to make nightmares into weapons. The galaxy had asked for soldiers. Humanity had sent something better. They had sent the darkness itself, and the darkness had answered.